Some of the best picks of the NFL draft every year are not the ones taken at number 1 overall or in the top 10 or even in the first round. Some of the best picks happen in the 5th round, the 7th round, the 3rd round. We're going to talk about some of those players today, but I can't hit on everybody, which is why my next video will be grading every team in the NFL draft, talking about every team's draft class at length to some degree. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the best picks, the biggest steals of the 2024 NFL draft. And this is the only first round pick I'm going to include. And there were some really great picks beyond this. I liked where the Vikings got Dallas Turner. Even though they had to trade up, I liked where the Eagles got Quinyon Mitchell and the Lions got Terrion Arnold. But Rome Odunze at number 9 I think is great value because of what it means for the Bears in particular. Not only do you not have to move up for Odunze when you only had 4 draft picks as a whole in this draft. I know they ended up trading back into this draft after their 4th pick was up. But Rome Odunze was the 3rd receiver off the board. He's about a top 5 player in this class. Keenan Allen is only under contract for 2024. So Rome Odunze is getting a wide receiver 1 for the future when you already have DJ Moore. This is a really great pickup for Chicago, and it's just the fact that Odunze was wide receiver 3 off the board and not even a top 8 pick in the draft. I know he still went top 10. Obviously, he's a great player. It's not amazing value, but I thought it was pretty good value when you consider he was the 3rd receiver off the board at a really important position, surrounding your new rookie quarterback with another big-time weapon. I think is a great move for Chicago. Okay, now that we're done with the first round pick, the top 10 guy, huge steal, I get it. Let's move on to pick 40. It was Cooper DeJean from Iowa. The Eagles grabbed him, and his versatility is going to be incredibly valuable for that team. As a Giants fan, I absolutely hate this pickup because I think DeJean is a really talented player. He's a really good athlete that I think would work playing over the top. At safety, I think he can play in the box. I think he can play the overhang role. I think he can play in the nickel, of course, which is very similar, obviously. And I think if you want him to and you need him to, he can play in the boundary as well. He's got great size and speed. He is a really good player who is instinctive, doesn't miss tackles, just a really good player that honestly should have been a first-round pick. And I think Adonai Mitchell should have been a first-round pick as well. We know how NFL teams approach the draft, and a lot of it is drafting on upside. You look at what the Jaguars did with Mason Smith, for example. Mason Smith is not very good right now. He just has NFL size and pedigree. He was pretty good a couple of years ago. We thought he'd have a big breakout season, but a big injury kind of set him back. But teams draft on upside. Adonai Mitchell has as much upside as basically any player in this draft. 6'2"-ish, maybe a little bit taller than 6'2", with low 4.3 speed. He's a fluid and easy mover with really good route running ability for his size. He is a really good player that has dealt with some injuries in the past, of course, at Georgia, put together a healthy season at Texas, but then you have concerns about, okay, he's not running his routes at full speed, and he's even said as much. He was only running them about 85% most of the time so he could stay on the field, so he says. But this is someone who, if he was not involved in the progression, would kind of take the play off a little bit, and that's a little bit concerning. But the upside here is extraordinary. He's a really talented player. I had him as his top 25 player in the draft. I thought he was well worth drafting in the first round, and especially when you can, again, do what the Bears did with Rome Odunze, build around your young quarterback. Anthony Richardson needs more weapons. This is kind of the finishing piece of the offense, in my opinion, when you have now Adonai Mitchell, you have Josh Downs in the slot, you have obviously a wide receiver 1 in Michael Pittman Jr. to be your X. Now, Adonai Mitchell's like an X who can move to the Z now, or you can have not necessarily fully established roles like that, and you can have, okay, you know, Pittman's more of our possession guy. Mitchell can give us a field stretcher and another big body in the red zone, but he's also a really solid route runner. Downs is our big slot yards after catch guy, but can also win down the field. I just think getting more good players in an offense is never a bad thing, and you're going to have to compete in the AFC South. You're going to have to score a lot of points. We know the Texans are going to put a lot of points up on the board. The Jaguars are trying to do the same thing with Brian Thomas Jr., adding him into Jacksonville, bringing in Gabe Davis, Devin Duvernay as depth and a return man for Trevor Lawrence. We already know about Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. The name of the game is to put points on the board. Yes, you got to be able to stop other teams from doing it, but with all the rules nowadays, I hate to get on my soapbox here, but the league wants the NFL to score points. They want more offense. They want more points. The NFL, with like the actual, not the league, but the personnel, is trying to erase that. They're going more too high. They're trying to take away explosive plays. NFL offense is trying to counter that. And Adonai Mitchell is a good example of that. Get another weapon in the mix. I know I'm kind of on a tangent here, but yeah, really good value at 52. He should have been a first rounder. Rare running back appearance. It's Trey Benson from Florida State. The Arizona Cardinals took him at 66. I think he was a top 50 player in the draft. Yes, he plays a lesser valued position, that is running back. I get that, but he's got NFL size and speed. He's got great contact balance. He runs a little too upright for my liking, and I think that can limit, just how many tackles he's going to be able to break and keep his balance. But even with that upright running style, as I mentioned, he does have good contact balance. He's able to break these tackles and bust explosive plays. So I don't know that it's going to be a huge deal. I think maybe that's just his style where he feels comfortable. I thought he should have been picked probably a little bit earlier than this. We know the league doesn't value running back, but I had him as a top 50 player. And speaking of top 50 players, I really thought Junior Colson was an incredible prospect at linebacker. I had him as a top 30 player in the draft, and it's just really tough to find flaws in his game. He's got NFL size at 6'3", almost 250 pounds. He's got great speed, sideline to sideline, but also playing downhill, can blitz, is great in coverage. Typically, if you're talking about a guy that's 250 pounds at linebacker, more of a thumper, more of a downhill type of guy, more of a run stopper, probably going to need to take him off the field on third downs. Not Junior Colson. He is exceptional in coverage. He's just a classic 3-down Mike linebacker that apparently is going to be the green dot type player, able to lead a defense, call a defense. Jim Harbaugh obviously liked what he saw of him at Michigan and brings him back onto his team, this time in Los Angeles. Junior Colson, pick number 69. Nice. But there's actually, I don't know how much you want to value this, but there's actually a history of the number 69 overall pick in the draft being very, very good. I'll give you some examples. And there are some really good players in here. Tank Dell from a year ago, Damian Lewis, who just signed a big contract, Cooper Kupp, Yannick Ngakoue, Tyler Lockett, Tyrann Mathieu, Jared Veldier, Jason Witten, and that's going back to 2003. I skipped over some who are good players as well, like, BJ Hill's been a solid contributor. I would say that Josh Oliver has been in the NFL for a little while now. It plays a role. But yeah, I'm a big Junior Colson guy, regardless of the 69th pick lore. I think he's a great player. We'll talk about another linebacker back-to-back here at number 98. It's Peyton Wilson from NC State. I thought he was a top 3 linebacker in the class. They get him 98 picks down the board. Yes, the injury history is ridiculous with multiple torn ACLs, no ACL in at least one of his knees, as far as I heard. Some shoulder injury stuff as well. Keeping him on the field and healthy has been an issue, but he's a really, really good athlete, even with no ACL, which is more for lateral movement if you didn't know. He still ran sub 4.45 at the combine, like 4.41 or 4.43. Absolutely flying. Plays pretty fast at times. Not always. Sometimes it's a processing issue, but for the most times he's instinctive. He's a playmaker. He's a really good athlete. And the only reason he falls to number 98 is because of the injury stuff. And he's also old. But as far as the player goes, yeah, I think he's a stud. I remember being excited about Tylan Wallace. Ravens took him late in the draft. Hasn't really played a ton. I know had a big, I think, punt return touchdown. Might have been a walk-off winner for the Ravens. But, something late in the game like that. But Tez Walker, I'm equally excited about. You got to remember that guys down the board now as we get into round 4, round 5, and beyond. It is tough for those guys to become contributors. But Tez Walker, I think, is going to be different. He's got NFL size and speed. He has this great knack for getting downfield. And I think with his combination of size and speed, as I mentioned, he will be a productive deep threat in the NFL. He drops because of his drops at the Senior Bowl. I would guess played an impact, but I'm not going to take 1 week of practice away from the guy that put out really good film, not only at Kent State, but of course for UNC, second half of the season as well. He was a really, really good player after getting granted eligibility. He is a stud, and I think tremendous value at 113. I like Tanner Bordolini at 117. We know the Wisconsin Badgers are pretty good at producing offensive linemen, right? And we know the Indianapolis Colts love to draft really good athletes, and Tanner Bordolini is no exception. Great 10-yard split, great 40-yard dash time. His 20-yard shuttle was a 4.28. For perspective, it's just, a quickness and agility test, and it's a really good indicator for interior offensive linemen because you're going to be pulling a lot, you're going to be moving a lot, and especially in like a zone blocking scheme, you can see a guy like Tanner Bordolini be incredibly effective. And 4.47 is generally like the rule of thumb for, okay, you're a really quick offensive lineman. And the 4.47 number, a lot of guys who have run under that, it's a really good indicator for future success for offensive linemen. Guys like Jason Kelsey, go late in the draft, have a sub 4.47 20-yard shuttle, and end up being, great player. Obviously, they do a number of other things well, but the barrier of entry here, you need to be athletic enough to be an effective NFL player. And not only is Tanner Bordolini athletic enough, he is an exceptional athlete. In fact, he was the #1 ranked center in terms of total athleticism score for the NFL Combine. He's a really, really good athlete who moves well on tape, obviously, as well. And that's kind of the thing. He was drafted as a guard and does still have size, 6'4", 303, where you can feel comfortable about him at guard. But, I'd love to see him play center. It's just you have Ryan Kelly there. If he gets injured, or if you want to try Bordolini at guard, he's great depth at minimum. I talked about Jaden Hicks in my best picks of day 3 video, and of course he's going to make the NFL draft steals list. He's a really athletic box safety that can also play over the top. It's not just your traditional, he's going to play in the box. He's a big physical safety. Of course, he can come down and hit. Like, that's no question about Jaden Hicks. But he's not limited to playing in the box. He's not going to be just, okay, maybe he's an overhang defender. Maybe he's going to be in on rundowns. We need to take him off the field because we don't trust him in coverage. That is not Jaden Hicks. He's athletic. He's fast. He can play over the top and too high. He can be a really effective player. I don't know how he was available at 133. And the Chiefs consistently and continually get these awesome players that fall down the board, and they develop them. And you can see it in so many different scenarios. Creed Humphrey fell a little bit end of the second round, one of the best centers in the league. Trey Smith fell a lot due to some injury stuff, medicals. I think it was a blood clotting in his legs. Very scary stuff, but ends up falling way down the board. Pro Bowl, all-pro type guard, right? Trent McDuffie, for me, falls in the first round, and they get a stud. Obviously not there anymore, but L'Jarius Sneed was available later in the draft, and they picked him up. Ended up being a very, very good player for him. And they traded him, of course, got some value back, but he was instrumental in them winning, a championship or two. So, I would not say, okay, Jaden Hicks is a bad player. This is why he falls to 133. I think he's a great player. Jared Wiley has a ton of potential as well, but the Chiefs killed the draft. Hicks has obvious starter upside. Another guy I talked about in my best picks of day 3, it's Spencer Rattler. Yeah, you wouldn't typically think backup quarterback, one of the best picks in the draft, but the last quarterback went at number 12 overall. I thought for that reason, Spencer Rattler, who was the clear and obvious best available QB, would be maybe as high as a second-round pick. Maybe he gets into the third, but he gets all the way down here to 150. He has an electric arm. The arm talent is borderline elite. That hasn't been the problem for Spencer Rattler. He can throw the ball downfield. He was actually the most accurate passer of 25-plus yards downfield in 2023. Bet you didn't know that, and it's not like the offensive line was something spectacular either. Rattler is a really solid prospect. Needs to be more consistent overall, that's for sure, and intermediate, underneath. That stuff needs to get better. It was a very clear and obvious problem at Oklahoma, and I hated this guy. He was so unlikable on QB1, the reality show. He was so unlikable at Oklahoma, because I hate Oklahoma, of course, as a big Texas fan. But Spencer Rattler apparently has really matured at South Carolina and put some pretty good tape together for 2023, and didn't do so with a lot of weapons. Of course, the offensive line was really the worst part of that. Yes, Juice Wells Xavier Leggett, as I got to practice saying now. And then Omega Blake, I guess, was in there as well. But the offensive line was abysmal, and he just was a really solid player in 2023. I'm not saying the weapons were awful, obviously. Juice Wells is a good player, but only had him for, one healthy season. He got injured. And then Xavier Leggett was like the only guy they had, and he only has one season of production. So 2 years there at South Carolina for Rattler. Couldn't really get a consistent group of guys going at the same time, and the offensive line was not good. But I think he has starter upside. And how many players can you say that about for a quarterback drafted outside the top 100? It's pretty rare. How about Christian Jones? Speaking of Texas, hook 'em horns. He was the number 55 player on Daniel Jeremiah's big board. I like Christian Jones. I didn't like him quite that much. I thought he had a really good offseason. I thought it was a little bit better than the film he put on over his career at Texas, but 2023 was good. He is athletic enough, and he had a great Senior Bowl. I really like Christian Jones as a prospect. Not enough to put him in my top 50, but top 75 player in the draft for me. He ends up going at 162. That's pretty great. And we'll round things out with Dylan McMahon, interior offensive lineman from NC State. This is another guy, like we talked about with Tanner Bortolini, really, really good athlete. And with the Eagles, you look at what they actually need, and offensive line kind of sticks out. Because, yes, Jordan Mailata's great, right? No one would question that. Landon Dickerson's great, but Jason Kelce retires. Yeah, you drafted Cam Jurgens to be his replacement. We'll see how that goes in 2024. Could be great, maybe not so much. At right tackle, Lane Johnson's a Hall of Famer, but how long does he have left? And Tyler Steen is expected to be your right guard. And that's not terrible. He's a good athlete. He was drafted for a reason a few years ago as well. But Dylan McMahon, I think, could compete for a starting job within the next few years. Again, a really, really good athlete. And if the Cam Jurgens experiment does not work the way you intended, and I do think he's unfortunately going to be quite a good player for Philadelphia, and I hate the Eagles as a Giants fan. How am I a Giants and Texans fan, or Texas fan? I've talked about this before. A lot of family went to Texas, grew up going to Texas and Texas games, just a big Texas fan all the way around. My family made sure of it, and it's not like growing up in New Jersey, you had a ton of options. My parents didn't go to Rutgers or anything, and nobody I know did. So no one really is just a Rutgers fan because they live in New Jersey, to my experience as a New Jersey kid for, 18 years. So regardless of that, Dylan McMahon, I think, can end up being a really, really solid player for the Eagles. And again, starter upside, it's tough to find that at 190. If you look at Dylan McMahon here, another guy who is, as I had mentioned, incredibly athletic, and that just gives you a big boost. He ran 5.1 in the 40, but the 10-yard split's more important at 1.75. But that 20-yard shuttle, that three-cone, very impressive. 20-yard shuttle especially, 4.33, very agile, very easy mover, and somebody that, again, I could see growing into a starter if all goes well. But outside of that, he could just be a solid backup, and that's really valuable at 190. But that's going to do it for my draft steals, biggest steals of the 2024 NFL Draft. Grading every team coming up next. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.